Hello Raptors fans, and welcome to Raptors Report. Today we'll be looking at the Eastern Conference playoff picture and who the Raptors could be facing in the postseason. We'll look at matchups, realistic expectations, as well as the likelihood that the Raptors end up facing each team. Let's jump in. On Saturday, after a win versus the Pacers, the Toronto Raptors moved into sole possession of the 6th seed in the NBA. This is a lot better than most prognosticators expected when the season started. ESPN predicted the Raptors would finish with 36 wins. The statistics website 538 predicted the Raptors would win 41, and Vegas predicted the Raptors would finish with around 36 as well. The Raptors have already kicked all of those expectations to the curb with their 42nd victory of the season, and seem poised to continue their winning ways with only a few games left. Even I, a guy who I think errs on the optimistic side of things when it comes to the Raptors, thought that the Raptors would be headed for the play-in tournament, which is still very much a possibility, but the Raptors have certainly overperformed and remain a threat to make the playoffs outright. With that in mind, why don't we take a look at the potential matchups that the Raptors could face? First, let's examine the play-in tournament. There are a number of reasons that the play-in tournament is something that the Raptors want to avoid. The first reason is rather obvious. It's a single game format that is double elimination for the 6th and 8th seed and single elimination for the 9th and 10th. The Raptors would certainly be one of the best teams in the play-in bracket, but as they've shown year after year, they are really bad at winning the first game of a series. The Raptors have done pretty well in the past decade, and they still have lost the first game in 11 of their 14 playoff series in that time frame. With Nick Nurse at the helm, there's even less of a reason to want to be involved in single-game series. Nurse is excellent at making adjustments from game to game. His schemes have been a big part why the Raptors have been able to rebound between games and make life very difficult for the Raptors' opponents. A 7-game series would let the Raptors' coaching staff create a game plan to stifle opponents. A 1-game series would not. On top of that, there are some teams in the play-in that the Raptors do not want to face. The Nets have been playing possum for most of the season, with Kyrie Irving sitting for the majority of games and Ben Simmons potentially waiting in the wings. Kevin Durant is arguably the best player in the entire league, and if there's one guy you don't want to face with a single game on the line, it's him. The Cavs are also currently lurking in the play-in as well, and if, on the off chance, Brooklyn or Charlotte were to leapfrog both the Raptors and the Cavs, the Raptors could very well face them as well. I expect Jarrett Allen to return at some point this season, and he would make them a much more formidable opponent than they've been for the past few weeks. Atlanta is also another wildcard that will probably remain in the play-in, but could be a threat to send the Raptors home if the Raptors lose the 7th, 8th game. Basically, being in the play-in is bad. The Raptors don't want to be there for many reasons. So with that out of the way, let's look at the teams they could face in the real playoffs. If they get through the play-in, or if they get into the playoffs at 6th, or even 5th, they could essentially face anyone with the exception of probably the Bulls. The top of the conference is an absolute dogfight, with Miami, Philly, Boston, and Milwaukee all within a nose hair of one another. No team looks truly elite right now with the exception of one team, the Boston Celtics. I'll begin with the Boston Celtics because I think that they are currently the most dangerous team in the conference, despite losing center Robert Williams III to a knee injury earlier this week, and are the team that I would least like to face as a Raptors fan. Despite starting the season terribly, with rookie coach Ime Udoka being raked over the coals, the Celtics have been unreal in the second half of the season and have won 23 of their past 27 games. The Celtics combine excellent defense at every position, veteran experience, a superstar scorer in Jason Tatum, and a great secondary scorer in Jaylen Brown. They also made a shrewd deal near the deadline to acquire Derek White from the Spurs, who's done a great job solidifying their bench. Ime Udoka, despite being a rookie coach, has rounded into form, and he has the Celtics playing at a high level. Even if he's still learning on the job, Nick Nurse showed that having head coaching experience is not a prerequisite for getting the job done when the Raptors won the championship 3 years ago. In terms of matching up, there are no obvious mismatches that the Raptors would have to worry about, and it would likely be a grinded-out war just like the last time they faced off against one another. Tatum and Brown could threaten to outshine the Raptors' stars, and even if there's no massive weak spot for the Celtics to exploit, it could still be a big problem. There is still a rather good chance that the Raptors will face them in the playoffs in the first round, so it's definitely not a waste of time talking about that possibility. Why don't we go in declining order in terms of teams I would prefer not to face in a playoff series, with the Bucks being in second place in that category. Despite having a bit of a championship hangover, and despite the Raptors historically having had the Bucks number, and despite the fact that the Raptors own the season series 3-0, the Bucks are still a very strong team, and as everyone knows, regular season success should be taken with a large grain of salt, if not discounted entirely. The biggest issue with facing the Bucks is obviously Giannis Antetokounmpo. He is a generational talent and will likely retire as a top 10 player of all time when all is said and done, and he just came off a dominant run to the championship. His supporting cast is also much better than the last time the Raptors and Bucks squared off. Gone are playoff underperformers Eric Bledsoe and Nikola Mirotic, and in are the stalwart Drew Holiday and Bobby Portis. Brook Lopez, a premier rim protector, has recently just rejoined the lineup. Chris Middleton is a hot and cold player, being largely cold when facing the Raptors, but last season showed that he can turn it on when the Bucks need him most. In terms of coaching, I would certainly take Nurse over Budenholzer, who has shown that he's slow to make adjustments, even when they seem to be screaming in his face. But overall, the system he preaches is solid and suits the roster they've assembled for him. As for the rosters and matchups, there is a big mismatch, and I would argue he is a mismatch versus any team or player in the NBA in Giannis. Giannis is strong, fast, huge and skilled, and has the smarts to make the correct decision with the game on the line. The Raptors' game plan would be to stop Giannis with smart doubles, picking him up quickly in transition, and generally forcing the Bucks to beat the Raptors with their secondary stars and shooting. It would be a tough series and, in my opinion, one of the ones that the Raptors would want to avoid. Just like any team in the top 4, the likelihood that the Raptors face the Bucks is pretty high. The seeding at the top of the conference seems to be a roll of the dice, and the Raptors could also slot right into one of the seeds that would face them in the first round. And that just about does it for this week's episode. Tune in next week to hear what I think about the final 2 potential playoff matchups. And if you enjoyed the content, please subscribe and leave a like, as it helps the channel grow. And as always, thanks for tuning in to Raptors Report, your source for in-depth Raptors content.